The all-new third generation Honda HR-V arrived a few months ago as one of the most distinctive offerings in the small SUV segment. And this is the HR-V VIX, aka the petrol version. And you can call it that because the only other variant available is called EHEVL. In other words, the self-charging hybrid version. A simple choice, right? Well, it's more complicated than merely flipping a coin. So here are our top 5 reasons why you perhaps should go for the HR-V petrol version, and stick around because we've also got a few reasons why perhaps you shouldn't. But let's start with perhaps the biggest new highlight, and that is styling. It's fair to say that few motoring nameplates have taken such a clean sheet approach to design as Honda's small SUV. There's virtually no correlation between the boxy originator and the curvaceous second generation, and this third take once again brings a hammer down on the design mold. I think this new version is quite striking and handsome, but those of you who don't agree have to admit it is very distinctive. Honda claims the new HR-V has the elegance of a coupe, though because the roofline drops from the C pillar rather than the B pillar, that's technically not true. In fact, in design terms, it's more of a liftback. One coupe-like visual trick, however, is the hidden door handles for the rear doors, which gives it a sort of 3-door appearance, much like the last generation. So it might be coupe-like, but this plastic cladding and jacked up ride height really anchors that SUV look. And in fact, there's so much space in there, you could lose a dog under there. And set on these rather sexy looking two-tone 18-inch wheels, the petrol version doesn't actually look any less expensive than the hybrid version, despite the fact that it actually is. Which brings us to the next highlight, pricing. The HR-V VIX is measurably more affordable than the hybrid version that looks, at least, almost identical. When we reviewed the hybrid version a few months ago, it clocked in at a whopping $8,300 more than the petrol version, which is $36,700 drive away. But in the last couple of months, the price of the hybrid has actually jumped to $47,000 drive away, which means the difference is over 10 grand. So what don't you lose? Well, a lot of the important hardware stuff underneath, such as the torsion beam based rear suspension, the 4-wheel disc brakes and the variable rack steering are all identical between the two variants. And as mentioned earlier, the petrol version doesn't skimp on big 18-inch rolling stock. So even this base version gets dusk sensing LED headlights, power retractable mirrors, rain sensing wipers, front and rear parking sensors, and a reversing camera with dynamic guidelines. Which brings us to big plus number 3, in that the base HR-V does not skimp on safety features. In fact, the only 2 key features that are missing from the base petrol version is blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. The caveat to this is that HR-V currently isn't rated by ANCAP, though it does fit a complement of 6 airbags, which brings us neatly to highlight number 4, the front row. Climb into the first row and one word comes to mind: Mazda. This new generation carries over next to nothing from the stodgy old generation HR-V, and it's pretty clear that Honda's inspiration was coming from outside the fold. The steering wheel design is reminiscent of Mazda, as is the look and vibe of the 7-inch semi-digital multi-information display. A lot of the controls and switches are very Mazda-esque, particularly the sudden introduction of these very fetching rotary dials. The 9-inch touchscreen multimedia system is vastly superior to the clunky old one in the last HR-V, and it features all of the same content in the high-spec hybrid version, including sat-nav, digital radio, and wireless Apple CarPlay. Nice one. Sure, some of the materials, particularly the plastics, are workmanlike and hard and shiny, but other than the vinyl steering wheel, there's not a lot of conspicuous cost consciousness. You even get push button start, which is the entry point to highlight number 5, the chassis. Many small crossovers promise sportiness in the design, but when it comes to the driving experience, they kind of let the team down. But the HR-V offers genuine engagement when it comes to handling. Look, it's no substitute for a current sporty Civic, which has a cracker of a driver's chassis, but there's enough in the HR-V's step to match its spirited styling and to put a smile on your face when you start digging in. The steering is clear and direct, and there's ample grip from its 225mm rubber, and it feels light in the direction change because, well, it is. The form guide suggests that it weighs just 1267 kilograms, but we weighed it independently with a full tank and no occupants on board, and it is bang on its claim. While the ride is a little taut, it does bring a nice edge to its dynamic character. Complementing that is some pretty decent compliance on the move. However, once you drop the speed down, it can get a little bit choppy around town. Unfortunately, the petrol HR-V doesn't quite have the shove deserving of the chassis, which brings us to the big miss number 1, powertrain. Both the petrol and the hybrid versions of HR-V offer a 1.5 litre petrol engine, but it's the former that only plies 89 kilowatts. The petrol version only plies 145 newton meters, and all of it arrives well up at 4,300 RPM. That might have been ample for the little original HR-V, but it's not nearly enough for this third generation's growth spurt. Despite HR-V's lightweight, any enthusiasm with the right foot sends it into a ruckus of just noise and effort. And that really doesn't do its comfort and refinement levels any favours. In comparison, the hybrid offers 253 newton meters, which is over an extra 100 newton meters on tap, and all of that is available right off idle. We independently tested the 0 to 100 km/h performance, and we got 1106, which at double figures is really not that handy. But braking was far more impressive at just 36.4 meters, which is one of the best that we've gotten for an SUV. Which brings us to myth number 2, fuel economy. Honda's combined claim is 5.8 litres per 100. And in a worst case scenario, its urban claim is 6.8 litres. But I'll tell you, I've been driving this car around all week for a couple of 100 kilometres, and it rarely dips below the mid-7s. When we reviewed the hybrid a few months ago, it returned a 4.8 litre figure off a 4.3 litre claim. And the advantage of the hybrid version is that around town, fuel consumption actually drops, with Honda's claim at 2.9 litres. So when it comes to comparing the two available HR-V powertrains, it's a bit of a lose-lose scenario when it comes to opting for the petrol. Myth number 3 fronts up in HR-V's second row, and it's not in an area you might expect. There are only 2 seatbelts. That's right, it's a 4-seater. Whatever the technicalities, Honda's small SUV can only carry 4 occupants, where its rivals can carry 5. That's a real shame because, as you can probably see, there's ample knee and headroom in the back here of the HR-V and plenty of space for 3 people wide. Still, it's a bit of a mixed bag because there are no rear air vents, no device power, and these rear seats are actually pretty uncomfortable. So you can only fit 4 occupants. What it does offer is Honda's very clever magic seat arrangement that has 18 different configurations to load all sorts of objects. And the seats fold for a flat 4 to create a handy surrogate van. Myth number 4 is boot space, and at 304 litres, there's not a lot of it for a wagon this size. But as mentioned earlier, that's because it's a liftback and you lose a lot of volume underneath the hatch. There's actually some pretty handy cubbies under the floor, which is nice, but the actual load space itself is pretty constrictive, which limits the size of the objects you can load. And gripe number 5 is pricing. Yes, I know, it was one of our positives, but that was relative to the hybrid version. The HR-V's tip-in point of 36,700 driveaway still massively overshoots some of its key competitors in Mazda CX-30, Mitsubishi ASX, and Hyundai Kona, most of which enter with a 2. But of course, the other factors that weigh into value include ownership and running costs. As mentioned earlier, the petrol version's mid-7 consumption off a 5.8 litre claim is hardly brag-worthy, but the sweetener there is that it will run on 91 octane fuel. The HR-V also comes with Honda's 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, which is pretty much the default in this day and age. But what's really enticing is cap price servicing. Each visit will only cost you $125. However, every 12-month term is capped at 10,000 kilometres. In the past 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $858 comprehensively insuring a new Honda HR-V. Every situation is different, and your premium will vary based on factors insurers take into account, like where you live, where you park your car, and your driving history. So those are my thoughts on the Honda HR-V VIX. It brings smart looks, decent levels of equipment, and a great chassis, and those are the elements that are sure to draw the interest of many buyers. It is, however, pricey in outright terms and hamstrung by a ho-hum powertrain. But perhaps the biggest deterrent is the 4-seat configuration for a car in a segment where 5 seats is still the norm. So leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.